Pillars, an organization providing shelter to people without homes in the Fox Valley, provides its annual report. New at 4, Emily Riley learns the challenges Pillars is trying to overcome and the outside help keeping them going.
Pillar directors, volunteers, and others gathered in Appleton to discuss the highs and lows of the year behind them, beginning with the struggles the organization has faced, such as keeping employees.
And crisis housing in particular, our shelter teams and resource center teams, that turnover was as high as 95%.
Once wages were raised to counter the turnover rate, Pillars had another challenge to deal with.
That forces us to operate with a deficit in 2023, with our leaders planning feverishly to alleviate deficits that are also projected for 2024 and 2025.
Lisa Strandberg, Pillars executive director, says COVID-19 and rising inflation indirectly worsened the situation. Despite these challenges, Pillars was able to advance in other areas with the help of donors. Last year, 5 donors contributed 3 properties, which added an additional 9 units. Additionally, programs like the 7-day service center and the winter shelter overflow were successful.
That's the reality of family homelessness right now. It's on the rise, and it's hard to stomach. And winter shelter overflow has helped us to alleviate the difficulties of those folks who have nowhere else to go.
While the community-wide housing shortage has risen, leaders at Pillars say they have plans to alleviate it.
To be leaders together, to be innovators together, so that we can make sure that occurrences of homelessness are rare and brief and everybody can find their place that they call home.
In Appleton, Emily Riley, Action 2 News.